My first exposure to hypnosis and self-hypnosis was over 40 years ago. I was in my early to mid-teens. I was reading a lot of New Age and self-help books, and I came across this series of books by a guy, I believe his name was Melvin Powers. They were sort of not necessarily the highest quality books. I would, call them dime store kind of books, but Melvin Powers most certainly talked about and showed how to hypnotize someone. And so I took what I learned from Melvin and I would hypnotize my friends and I'd make them see things that weren't there. I'd make them behave in ways that they wouldn't have behaved if they weren't under the influence of hypnosis. And it was something that I had some fun with, let's say back then. And then, I don't know, I just sort of left it alone. At different times, of course, I've become more and more interested in hypnosis and how it can have effect on the mind body connection and different things along those lines. But I have not been an active hypnotist, in other words, other than in one way. And this is the most powerful form of hypnosis that anyone can use, and you are using whether you realize it or not. It's your self-talk. Your self-talk is the most powerful form of hypnosis, and in particular self-hypnosis, that you are practicing, whether you realize it or not. The self-talk that we tell ourselves in our mind, the way that we interpret the world around us, the way that we interpret the way that people behave and treat us, and the way that we see politics and religion and how we talk about it to ourselves in our mind is so hypnotizing that it can lead some people to serious delusion. I often talk about the idea between reality and actuality. A dragon is real. It's not actual. But there's really something called a dragon that someone pulled out of their imagination. It breathes fire, large lizard with wings that flies through the air. This is something that's real, but it's not actual. The reason I say this is I've known a lot of people who had things that they believed to be so true that they saw it as real, no matter what the argument was. You can take the flat earthers, for example. No matter what science shows them, no matter what experiments that they do that proves that the earth is a globe, they still see it as real that the earth is flat. It may not be actual. And the difference between, let's say, what's real and what's actual is what I call the insanity gap. The further that is the difference, the more insane someone tends to be. The closer, I don't know if they're ever really in perfect alignment, but the closer that they are to each other, I find people to be, let's say, more stable and less insane. Now, mind you, I'm using the word insane very loosely. I don't mean by the textbook idea of insane. What I mean is specifically the delusion that we can put ourselves under through the self-talk. Because when we have a particular self-talk and we're not monitoring it, we're not sort of taking some mindfulness and seeing what we're telling ourselves. This is the subtlest and most powerful form of self-hypnosis, of hypnosis, period, that can exist because it's constant. Even if you practice self-hypnosis for, let's say, 15 minutes a day, the structured kind, where you go into a quiet room and you bring on a meditative state, and you might say some type of mantra or affirmation to yourself, and you're hoping that this affirmation will sort of sink in and create change in your life. But if you spend 15 minutes a day doing that, and the rest of your waking day talking negative to yourself or talking contradictory to what you just had practiced, what hope does that 15 minutes really have? Our self-talk is our hypnosis. And if we're not mindful of our self-talk, this can create issues for us because we can create these belief bubbles, these bubbles of reality that, it's not actuality. It's reality for you, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's actuality. And in fact, when people practice this kind of mindfulness around their self-talk and they change their self-talk to, let's say, more supportive and more positive self-talk, science has found that what happens is there's the mechanism they call it is neuroplasticity. The fact that our brain can rewire itself. And literally, they've shown that people have rewired their brains by changing their self talk to a more mindful type self talk. This is how powerful it is. It literally has a physiological effect when we change our self talk. So I want to ask you, when you sit and you listen to yourself speak, are you supportive of yourself? If you make a mistake or you make some kind of mess up, are you supportive of yourself and encourage yourself to try again? Or are you critical of yourself and call yourself names? I know I was guilty of this for a long time, where I would, make some kind of mistake. I would drop a glass and it would break. And I'd be like, oh, you dumbass, you're such an idiot. And I had to catch myself. I had to stop myself from doing that. I had to say, no, you're not an idiot. You just made a mistake. And everybody makes mistakes. And in fact, I'm not really sure that there's, let's say, smart people and unsmart people. I would say that there's people who are aware of their situation maybe more so than some of the people who are unaware of their situation. And this awareness that I'm talking about is really encouraged and brought on by self-talk. If you listen to your self-talk, it will reveal a lot about how you feel about yourself. I know last week I talked about self-love and how important self-love is, that the love that you feel for yourself determines the amount of love that you can feel from other people. And I changed that through self-talk. I had to be the one that showed myself the love and the support to begin with. I had to be the one that had to be nurturing to myself. I had to create spaces within myself. I know we've sort of touched on multiple eyes previously. I had to address these different eyes. I had to have parental eyes who were nurturing to children eyes so that I could grow those children eyes up. I could mature them so that they wouldn't do the same behavior and let's say the same self-destructive behavior that would create problems in my life and unneeded stress for the people around me and all that kind of crazy stuff. And it's through this self-talk, being mindful on what I was saying to myself, I was able to change the way that I talk to myself and the way that I perceive the world. One of my, let's say, higher aspirations, one of my higher goals when it comes to mindfulness is to not be judgmental. And I travel a lot. And someone once told me that if you think you're not judgmental, go to an airport and be mindful and listen to yourself. And since I travel a lot, I find myself in a lot of situations in airports and train stations and bus terminals. And it's a great opportunity for me to practice observing and becoming mindfulness of my judgments and choosing a different line of thinking. So it's easy for me to see someone and make an instant judgment. And I do it. We all do it. But then I ask myself, how do you know that? How do you know that to be true? Why do you have that judgment? Or maybe I'm even judging the person for something I'm guilty of. And I'll say, whoa, wait, you're judging this person when you're guilty of that same thing? And as I start to free myself from this judgment of other people through self-talk and mindfulness, what I find is I'm less judgmental of myself as well. It's all weaved together. And it's all weaved together through this self-talk that we have going on in our minds. If you start to talk negative to yourself, or you think negatively about other people, or you think negatively about the situation that you're in, this is a great opportunity to practice self-talk because, the mind's relative. Everything's relative. So if you're having a bad day and things seem like they're really down and you just don't want to go on, rather than promoting that kind of mindset in your mind, moving further down the road and licking your wounds and thinking more about how someone has wronged you or the situation seems insurmountable, what I like to do is go back and think about times when I felt like this before and I was able to overcome it. This helps me overcome while I'm going through it today. Because it's all relative. And oftentimes when something, particularly around money or something like that, materialistic kind of goes bad for myself or for my friends, I always say 10 fingers and 10 toes. I still have 10 fingers and 10 toes, so I'm okay. I put this in a relative way. I change my self-talk so that I can start to adjust and think in a different way and see different opportunities. Because again, this hypnosis that we're doing to ourselves, this self-hypnosis that as we speak to ourselves determines how we see the world. When we start to change this self-talk, we see the world differently, which means different opportunities come our way. Different friends and associations and networks that we sort of derive support from come our way. Your self-talk is the absolute strongest form of hypnosis on the face of the earth. It's extremely subtle, and oftentimes we don't catch ourselves doing it. But if you do, and you can be mindful of what's going on in that moment, you'll start to change your life in a significant way because you're changing your self-talk. Remember, we're all stuck in the matrix. It's your job to find your way out. I hope what we share helps.